Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with acclaimed LA-based jazz singer Jeffrey Gimble. We spent some quality time talking about his new 2025 CD, Brand New Key, and a life that is bounded around America in the arts. He grew up in a jazz-filled home in Houston, Texas in the 60s and 70s, and while he was growing up, he would go with his band leader dad, Maynard, to gigs and spend endless hours listening to his family's vast jazz record collection. After spending 20 years in New York City as an actor, working in plays, musicals, and films, he moved to Los Angeles and he's never looked back. It's a great story. Enjoy this interview.
Jeffrey, it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, Joe. I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah, me too. So before we get into Brand New Key and your career in the jazz world, I want to know first and foremost, 5 years ago, this pandemic was raging, changing everything for all of us, especially for musicians. How did you make it through the pandemic, and how has it radiated into your world here in 2025?
For me, the pandemic really slowed everything down. Some people, like Josh Nelson, my friend who's the producer and pianist on my recording, he had a weekly or sometimes twice weekly show. But for me, I really, as a vocalist, I feel like I need the musicians in the room with me. I know some people did they did gigs where the musicians were somewhere else. And for me, I was pretty shut down. The one thing that I did was I continued to study. I worked with the vocalist Kate McGarry, and so I studied with her all through the pandemic. I was like, I'm just going to keep singing. I'm going to keep working on these songs. And then I also spent a lot of time studying with Katina De Luna, who's a marvelous vocalist here who teaches Portuguese pronunciation. And since I love Brazilian music, I just spent time working on that as well. And so I just kept, honestly, singing at home and working with tapes and just keeping the faith that at some point there'd be another opportunity to sing. And of course, listening to lots of music. That was really what kept things moving for me. But, and part of the reason that I recorded this was because I did lose a lot of momentum in terms of live performance, and I wanted to kind of get things started up again and remind people of what I do. So that's what I did.
That makes sense. So let's get into the new album. What was kind of the artistic vision, and how good does it feel on a visceral level to have this out?
Oh, my God. I mean, on one hand, given what's happening in this country right now, it almost feels like singing on the Titanic. But regardless of that, these songs for me, many of them were very time tested. They are songs and arrangements that I have been doing for probably, 7, 8 years, with the exception of just a few of them. There's just a few that were brand new. But many of them were pieces that when the opportunity to record came, I thought, well, these are the songs that I absolutely adore. And in gig after gig after gig, every time I have an opportunity to do them, I do them. So why shouldn't I record them? I think also for me, there was a huge difference between this recording and the one that I did back in 2013, which is just to say that these are not really heavily arranged. Certainly they are arranged to a certain degree, but as a vocalist, I wanted to explore what I bring to this great tradition on my own, away from lots of arranging. And so a lot of the stylistic choices are mine on these tunes. And I'm proud of that, and I wanted that to happen. It's not to say that I'm ashamed of the first album that I did. I'm not, but it was heavily influenced by the wonderful arranger and pianist Timur Hendelman, who helped me a great deal. But this was more, I felt like, very much my own personal artistic statement. Every song that I put on here, I had a real gut urge to record, either because I loved the vibe, or I loved the message, or I just loved the beauty of the tune.
So at the end of the day, what are you ultimately hoping the listener gets from this album?
Oh, that's an interesting question. You know, I hope they're taken on a journey, and I hope that they find intrigue and entertainment and maybe even comfort in listening to this music.
So let me ask you this. Take me back to your beginnings. How did this world of music and how did jazz become your life?
Well, it came to my life sort of late, which is to say that I grew up in a jazz-filled house because my dad had his own big band orchestra, and so I grew up listening to it, and I used to go, even when I was a little boy, and sit next to the bandstand and listen to the music. And I started very early playing piano and singing, but my piano playing and singing led to an interest in theater. So for years, I was a stage actor, especially interested in the work of Stephen Sondheim, and I was in New York, doing regional theater and stuff like that. And it was only when I moved to Los Angeles that I suddenly met a bunch of really marvelous jazz musicians, and this had always been something that I was deeply curious about. And the connection that I made with the musicians here, many of them are just not only talented people, but really marvelous, lovely people, just really down-to-earth, terrific people, encouraged me to become a part of this scene. And I remember a meeting with a pianist here who said, "God, you have a natural sense of swing." And so there were just little bits of encouragement along the way that made me think, well, I think maybe all those years of sitting next to my dad's bandstand at the age of 5 and 6, it must have gotten into my bones somehow. I was also really intrigued because I was a good friend of the singer Kelly Gray. I don't know if you know her. Kelly was a singer based in Austin, and then she moved to the Bay Area, and I just adored what she could do as a vocalist. And what she did mystified me because it was so different from what I was doing when I lived in New York and was doing musicals. I mean, the freedom and the depth of what she could explore as a singer really inspired me to want to try my hand at this.
So who were some early influences, aside from your dad and going to those gigs and being in that world there in Houston? What were some influences that eventually led you to find your footing and your voice?
I was always a Diane Reeves fan, big time. From early college days, I discovered one of her early albums, and I went to every Diane Reeves concert I could get my hands on. So definitely Diane Reeves. And then, as I mentioned, my friend Kelly Gray, I really followed her and was, Kelly was a very gifted vocalist, but I can't say I copy her or anything, but I was inspired by her. Was really inspired by back in the 90s when Terry Trotter put out these jazz versions of Sondheim songs. And since I was such a Sondheim fan, to hear them done in this jazz idiom also really inspired me. And then super inspired by and influenced by the recordings of Sergio Mendes at an early age, like 4 years old, because that was just a staple in our house, always playing those recordings. And it's been interesting to me over the years to find out how many incredible Brazilian composers they recorded, that I was exposed to so many of the great Brazilian composers just by listening to their recordings alone. So I would say definitely them. And it was probably more musicians than singers. People like Andre Previn, Oscar Peterson. My dad always listened to a lot of pianists, and also a lot of Wes Montgomery.
So let me ask you this. At the end of the day, you've dedicated your life to this craft. What is it that gets you up every day? What motivates you to not only perform this music, but to evolve as a human being, as an artist? What is that for you every day?
Well, I honestly feel like it is such a friggin' gift to be able to sing. I love that I can do this. And I am, every day that if I'm just practicing a song, I am always so grateful at the complete just magic of being able to do this. And in this particular town, being able to do it alongside such great musicians. I'm always looking for inspiration in other people's music, always looking for another song that I might want to sing. And since I have an acting background, I'm very driven by what's the message behind these songs. What does it leave you thinking and feeling? How does it affect you? I really believe that music can heal. And although you certainly can't stand behind the microphone and go, "Hey, I hope to heal everyone with this," that can't be your objective. I certainly know when I've heard great singers do their work that I sometimes feel changed. I certainly have felt that way when I've heard Diane Reed's. I regularly feel that when I listen to my mentor, Kate McGarry, to her recordings. I feel that way all the time. And I love that it's inspiring and therapeutic, and it really gives me the spark to want to be a part of this world. It really does. So yeah, that's what fuels me. I never know where I'm going to get inspiration from, but I do get a lot of inspiration from the world of old school R&B and a handful of singers that I was obsessed with in my college days back in the late 70s and early 80s. And I'm always going back to those people to listen to their recordings because I feel like that particular time, there was incredible music being made, but I also feel like there was a lot of truth in people's music back then. I don't feel like singers were focused so much on, hey, listen to how high I can sing. It was more about, I feel like so much of that music that I always reverberate to had a message. It had a message, and it made you think. And so I'm always going back to that stuff. That's sort of like my bucket that I go to.
What's interesting, you've talked about, coming from Houston, you've talked about New York and LA, and these are all very distinctly different regions of this country. How have those cultural differences lent to you and your concept of singing and being on stage and being an artist? How have those shaped you?
Well, Houston, I really felt like I got practical experience. I was lucky enough to be a part of a young theater company, and even though I wasn't performing jazz, it was a non-union theater where it was a full-time job, and I was on stage so much that at a certain point, the sort of, it's not like the magic of being on stage went away, but I was no longer awestruck about being on stage. It was like, yeah, This is my office. This is where I do my work. And so that was a huge gift to get at an early age, is just to be performing so frequently that the mystique of walking out there was removed. And instead I could just go and do the work. And I definitely carry that with me now. I feel like, you know, I'm not especially nervous when I go out there. I'm just grateful to sing, and I'm just very grounded. And then, of course, being in New York, you know, that definitely changes a person. And I was in New York City for 20 years. And I think New York taught me discipline, because people in New York really care about the craft that they're studying. I met more people in New York City who really, some people didn't even care if they ever, you know, acted or sung for money. They were just there to study the craft because they loved it. And so I felt like I really got discipline, and I feel like I really got the ability to be critical of what I'm doing, but not in a negative way. Just the ability to say, okay, is this communicating? And if it isn't, what can I do to change it so that it communicates? That I really learned that it's not about how I feel as I sing a song. It's about what the audience gets. Is it going out there? And I think that that's a gift that I got from my years in New York as an actor, and from studying, and from learning how to be kind of gently relentless about getting the work to a place where I could say, okay, I think this work is good. I think I like what I'm hearing, and I think that it is effective. And then coming out to LA is very different, because, well, of course, I'm not part of the acting scene at all out here. That wasn't something that interested me. But the blessing of this scene is that I very quickly met a lot of musicians who were really wanted to welcome me into their world and to show me the rules of jazz, and who did it very generously and very easily and very lovingly. And so, you know, that resulted in, when we were recording, working with a bunch of people where I'm proud of what we were able to put together, but there were like no egos in the room. We were just all working together for a common good and enjoying each other's company at the same time. And to me, that's heaven. So yeah, I mean, when I think about LA, of course, yes, I love the great weather here, and I like being able to get to beaches and that kind of stuff. But I really think about the jazz community that I've become a part of here, because many of them have really embraced me, and my artistry is part of what they've given me.
So let me ask you this. At the end of the day, why do you love this art form we call jazz?
I love it because it allows me, I think it allows me to express everything that I could possibly want to express. It's, you know, jazz is extraordinary because it isn't, you know, it is definitely not all about the words. And there are times when I can just leave the words behind, and maybe I'll just sing an ooh or an ah. And that's something a musical director in a musical would just fire you for, you know, trying anything like that. But with jazz, there is space to explore and to interpret and to engage with the music, I think, on the deepest level possible. So it is far more gratifying to sing this music and be a part of this tradition than anything I ever did before. That's what I love about it.
So if you could get into a time machine and go back in time and see one dream jazz show, where are you going?
Probably to one of Blossom Deary's gigs in the 60s. I really love what she did. It always sounded incredibly simple, but it wasn't. And I think her ability to reach you with a song was just unparalleled. I just think it just knocks me out. I'm always going back to her stuff. I think but that's a hard question because, of course, I would have loved to hear early Andy Bay as well. But Blossom Deary is just really, I don't know, something really, really beautiful and true about her work and her ability to accompany herself.
For sure. So let me ask you this, Jeffrey. Everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, fans, everyone that you work with on the bandstand, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Who do I think I am? Oh, my God. That's an interesting question. Who do I think I am? I feel like I'm a truth teller, and I want to be loved, and I want other people to join me on a journey to expressing truth through music.
What a great answer. So, brand new key, if anyone wants to pick up a copy, they want to catch you live, any of your previous work, any of the good business in your world, where do they go?
The recording is available for download or purchase on Bandcamp, or you can also buy it through me on my website, which is jeffreygimble.com. And my next gig coming up is at a cool club in Pasadena called Club 1881. That'll be September 6th. And, of course, I'm working on some other things, but that's the one definite thing coming up. That's what I got going. And I'm also, Brand New Key just got reviewed in this month's issue of Downbeat, which is a real honor.
This has been great. Jeffrey, thank you so much. Thank you for your story. Thank you for your time. Best of luck with this release and everything else. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for your time, Joe. I really appreciate it. It's great talking to you.
Thanks for listening and tuning into another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players and minds in LA, Houston, New York City, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Jeffrey for his time, energy, and cool. If you want to hear more Neon Jazz interviews, you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to us at YouTube, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.